The Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium presents Voices of Change, uncovering stories of the Western Pennsylvania disability movement. The Voices of Change logo is in the shape of an arrow pointing right. Voices of Change, the media history project of the Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium, records firsthand accounts of disability history. This is an interview with Father George Strohmeyer, co-founder of L'Arche Erie, and Mary Ann Zarnick, longtime staff member. The history of L'Arche Erie is part of Western Pennsylvania disability history. Interviewer is Guy Caruso. Photo shows Mary Ann Zarnick and Father George Strohmeyer seated for the interview. L'Arche Erie is a faith-based community where people with and without intellectual disabilities share life together. It is part of a worldwide federation of L'Arche communities and was the first in the United States. The French name L'Arche translates to the Ark, a reference to Noah's Ark. The logo for L'Arche Erie includes a drawing of a canoe floating on water. 3 human figures sit close to each other in the boat. In 1972, Father George Strohmeyer co-founded L'Arche Erie with Sister Barbara Karsznia. Father Strohmeyer served as pastoral leader for many years. Mary Ann Zarnick is one of the community's longest-serving staff members. Photo shows L'Arche members preparing to march in the 2010 St. Patrick's Day Parade in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Well, hello. My name's Guy Caruso, and it's December 3rd, 2019, and we're here at L'Arche Erie at 3745 West 12th Street, Erie, Pennsylvania. And I'm with the Institute on Disabilities at Temple University. I'm their Western coordinator, located down in Pittsburgh. And I'm also on the executive committee of the Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium. And the purpose of the Multimedia Histories Project of the Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium is to record firsthand accounts of disability history. The history of L'Arche Erie, the first L'Arche community in the United States, is part of that history. Today, we are interviewing Father George Strohmeyer, who co-founded the L'Arche community in Erie in 1972 with the late Benedictine Sister Barbara Karsznia. We're also interviewing Mary Ann Zarnick, who has worked at L'Arche in a variety of roles since 1976. Thank you, Father George and Mary Ann, for being here today. Well, L'Arche Erie is a faith-based community where people with and without intellectual disabilities share life together. It is part of the International Federation of L'Arche Communities. The worldwide L'Arche movement was founded by Canadian Jean Vanier, a former Catholic seminarian and philosophy professor. Vanier established the first L'Arche community in 1964 in Trolly in northern France. He invited 2 men with intellectual disabilities who had previously lived in an institution to share a residence with him. In the spirit of the gospel and the beatitudes that Jesus preached. The name of L'Arche translates in English to the Ark, a reference to Noah's Ark. L'Arche Erie was the first community of its kind in the United States. The number of L'Arche communities worldwide now number more than 150 in 38 countries. In the U.S., there are communities in Cleveland, Boston, and other locations, including Syracuse, New York, which I personally have some experience with. My history around L'Arche is that I was fortunate to visit Daybreak early on. Dr. Wolfensberger helped create the L'Arche community in Syracuse, New York, and I had a chance to sit on the board for a number of years, which was just a wonderful experience for me. I had a chance in 1987, where I met Mary Ann. We actually went to the international conference in Rome, Italy, and equally I had a chance to wash pots and pans in Inverness, Scotland, at a L'Arche community there. So they figured out the best role for me, so that worked out really well. Father George and Mary Ann, I've had the pleasure of meeting you in the past, as I have Vicky Wasniak, who is the current executive director of L'Arche Erie. So it's really my pleasure to interview you today. Now, Father George, let's start with you. Tell us about the events that led to founding of L'Arche Erie in 1972. Hard to believe, 47 years ago. How did you initially get interested in the teachings of Jean Vanier and the L'Arche movement?
We met, Sister Barbara and I met Jean at a weekend retreat in Toronto, a spiritual weekend, and we were referred to that by a priest in Toronto who made that first famous retreat with Jean in 1968, just north of Toronto. We went. I was struck by his spiritual message. I had never heard any human being, lay, Catholic, Protestant, bishop, nobody speak with such authority the gospel message. I was moved by that. I was changed by that. I was knocked over by that. Came home all excited about what we had heard. Didn't hear the word L'Arche and wouldn't have known what it meant. He didn't talk about L'Arche. He talked about the gospel. From there, retreat in Chicago in August of 1971, just months later. We met people from L'Arche in the original founding in Trolly. They came to be on retreat with us and discovered that wider world. And by then, we were very excited to come home and to receive, just by happenstance, an introduction or an invitation to an open house at Polk. So Barbara and I went to that open house and discovered people who were being ready for community release. We were ecstatic at what was going on around the world. It was not only Europe, it was here in the US, it was here in our home area. And that started the ball rolling for us.
Can you tell us a bit about the co-founder, the late Sister Barbara Karsznia, and how she became interested in Jean Vanier and the L'Arche movement as well?
I knew Sister Barbara. We were colleagues at Gannon University in Erie, and I was close to her community through that friendship. And she met the priest in Ottawa who had been with Jean. It was through her friendship with that priest that he came to Erie. He got to know a bunch of us, and he invited us, the two of us, to go to that original retreat in Toronto that touched our hearts a lot. So she had a way of sharing friends, bringing people together, and it was fortuitous. It was a providential thing. I wouldn't have known Jean Vanier. I would never have met him. I would not have known of his work otherwise.
Now, you both met Jean Vanier on several occasions, as you've explained. Other than his pastoral and spiritual message, did he have a social justice message at all in regards to how he looked at people with disabilities and what was happening with them?
He had an incredible open heart and mind. I don't think I've met anybody with as much universal sense of the human family, the interdependence of all people, that we can't, and was gospel-based, but also philosophically based. He got his doctorate in philosophy and theology, but there was something about his heart that was open to everybody, including those who are farthest from the center and people neglected. He often said that the most abused people in the world were people of disability who were rejected and put aside. He, just as L'Arche began, within the year of L'Arche's beginning, he wrote a rule of life for men and women of peace. He was touched by Gandhi when he went to India to found L'Arche. He discovered Gandhi, was immersed in Gandhi, came home and wrote this rule of life for communities of men and women of peace. It was always social justice for Jean. He left the Navy, the Canadian Navy, because he learned all that he could about how to shoot missiles, but he didn't learn much about how to love other human beings. So he discovered a whole new world of peace and justice. And that really is at the heart of L'Arche. It's underneath, it holds it up, it gives us a vision for each day. Often people don't think of that. I'm glad you asked that, because we think of him as founding homes. He was touched deeply by people of disability when he went to the institutions. But there was this deep underlying sense of the humanity of the whole world. He was with his mother in 1945 when people from the concentration camps were coming back to Paris. He was there on site. He saw how disabled they were, how debilitated they were, how humanly cruel the treatment was for these people. And all of that moved him beyond teaching philosophy in Toronto. He started that, but he did not stay there. He was called to something deeper and wider.
Yeah. Now, how did the other established L'Arche communities, both the original community in Tralee, you mentioned going to Daybreak, where Steve and Ann Newroth were mentors to you as well. Were there other mentors, and how did the other L'Arche communities in existence impact the Erie community?
The first community after Tralee was in Toronto. Then L'Arche jumped to India, and then to northern, southern France, then to Erie, then to the UK. The UK was preparing before we were, but we opened before they did. So there was friendships, but it was mostly with the people of Daybreak. We didn't have a network to rely on beyond them, so it started there. Steve Newroth would come to Erie, and we'd go to Polk together. He'd give a talk at Polk. He'd give a talk in Erie. Through that retreat, we also made friends, the retreat in Chicago, but we didn't have a big network at the beginning.
There was some connection too, I think, with Father Jim O'Donnell and Faith and Light that also drew you into. So he was there to support L'Arche Erie too, I believe.
That's right. Jim O'Donnell, the priest who was very close to Jean Vanier, and invited us to be part of a preparation for a whole year. Barbara and I went to Cleveland to prepare for a retreat that Jean gave the next year, 1972. So that was all, it wasn't L'Arche at first. It was spiritual message, transforming message, welcoming people of all abilities and disabilities, men, women.
Now, you mentioned Faith and Light. Can you explain what that was exactly?
Faith and Sharing was the name of the retreat movement, but Faith and Light was another movement that Jean Vanier founded with Marie-Hélène Mathieu and two men in Tralee who were not permitted to go to Lourdes. They couldn't go on pilgrimage because the parish from which they came said we can't welcome people of disability. That hurt the parents so much that Jean Vanier and Marie-Hélène Mathieu started this movement. Hundreds of people went to Lourdes, not just two, but hundreds, maybe 1,200 people went to Lourdes in 1971 for a retreat, for a time, a Holy Week retreat, but also an experience of community and dancing, singing, faith, joy, and that to this date is it's still spreading over the whole world, Faith and Light. So it's community to draw people out of their loneliness, out of their isolation, into a discovery of life when others welcome them out of this isolation into the light of joy and peace. And again, another movement of social justice.
So maybe step by step, can you describe how you and Barbara sort of, you got things going? And I know the Gertrude Barber Center, Gertrude Barber herself was an influence. And then Barbara, through her, I guess, work at Gannon with students that were also involved in the beginning. Can you speak a bit about that?
Sure. Dr. Barber was, when we came home, we went to see her because we recognized her as an outstanding person with a deep message regarding persons of disabilities. So we went there, we were struck by her, and we started volunteering. Every Sunday night we'd go there and create a little family, a little community of singing, dancing, talking, prayer. We did prayer. We did that for a whole year, and that was very moving for us to be engaged in that. Barbara was in the high school, the Benedictine high school in Erie, and she knew a lot of women in the community who were professional, all sorts of professions. So she called on them a lot as we began L'Arche.
Okay. Now, Father George, L'Arche communities emphasize the spiritual bond between members of the community, downplaying the distinction between who has or who does not have a disability. And I know that the term core member refers to those who are in the heart of the L'Arche community. Can you tell us a bit about the first 4 core members of L'Arche Erie? And we understand that they had lived at Polk previously to coming to L'Arche Erie?
Yes, all 4 were from Polk. They were, when we went to that open house, Barbara and I, we met this little group that was being formed by this employee at Polk. We met them. We went back a month later, and we spent time with them, and then we did that again, maybe in a month or 2. And all 4, but there were more in the group, but they didn't all come to Erie, but 4 of them came to Erie the day before Thanksgiving. We began at lunch in 1971 on the day before Thanksgiving. They would have called themselves high functioning. They had these words to describe who was low functioning, who was high functioning. They really were well adapted, but for some reasons, particular reasons, they were sent to Polk years ago, but they quickly adapted and they all got jobs. Every one of them had a job in Erie. We did this, of course, on our own. We didn't have that access to the Barber Center facilities at first, but they were all. And 2 of them went off to one to marry, the other to live in her own independence, and the 2 men as well. The 4 of them were happy to be with us, but they wanted to be independent of us as well.
So when you first went to Polk with Sister Barbara, what was your experience there? I mean, what did it?
It was an open house for clergy.
Okay.
I didn't get the invitation.
Okay.
But happily I went. It was an open house, and there was a day of some talking and lunch, and then a grand tour. We were struck by but of course we were filled with Vanier by then. We had just come back from L'Arche and Trolly, in fact, where we had discovered what was going on in Trolly, what life was like, and we were intoxicated with the idea of community, and so we started chewing on this guy's ear about what we had just discovered, and he was the one preparing people to be released. So.
And for the people who came to L'Arche initially, did they share any of their experiences at Polk with you and what that was like living at Polk?
They did. They talked about things that weren't easy for them to talk about or easy for us to hear, but loneliness, not succeeding in the greater community. I remember one of our founding members was in Pittsburgh and had failed in living alone in Pittsburgh. So there was a certain sense of defeat there. People were put there anger at having been placed at Polk for some reason. Some judge somewhere had agreed that they didn't belong in the neighborhood and they were sent to Polk. So, and yet some sense of industry as well. They found their life there. They fit in. They could express themselves in their own work, what they were doing at Polk, their own creativity. One of our men worked in the tailor shop. He was good at sewing. He could manage a sewing machine quite well. So but they all wanted to be out. They all wanted to find some. I remember Bill saying when he got to our house, he said, I always watched people on television in their homes, but I never had my own home to watch television myself. That's simple, just that he had a home. And that gave him the courage to go out and create his own home as well. Alone, he lived alone until his death. But.
Now, did you serve other people in L'Arche Erie that came from institutions as well, other than Polk?
Mary came from, yes.
Laurelton. Mary and Francis were from Laurelton. Sam, it was years later, in 1978, he came from Warren State Hospital.
And then Butler, what's near Butler?
Edmonton?
The little, an institution near Butler. Yeah, I can't remember the name.
And then how was the experience for people who came from their families versus from an institutional setting? How was that experience for people? How was it different?
We didn't have much experience of that.
In the beginning.
We really, we're really happy that we're focusing on people who had no family. In fact, it became my family. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter celebrations. Nobody had family to go to. No, we didn't shut down for a week or two so people go home for vacation. Right? There was no place to go.
So L'Arche Erie became their family.
Exactly. And even to this day, we try to pay attention, insofar as we're free to welcome people who have no family.
So in the early days, where was the first house? Can you walk us through what a day was like when you first started off with people?
It was, the house we were in was 112 years old, and there wasn't one straight floor in the building, but it was our home, and it was just wonderful. We were all excited about living there, being there, and I lived at the university, and I come over for all the meals, and I didn't stay there overnight. There was no room.
No room.
We didn't have big homes. Some of L'Arches in the world have big homes. We didn't. And we took care of things. Everybody had their own chores to do. We had two assistants who lived. One lived in at the beginning. Again, Barbara and this other assistant lived in. And we had assistants coming, but they couldn't all live in, so we didn't have a big, large group. But it was just normal life. We didn't have any money, nor were we approved by the state of Pennsylvania.
Tell us a little bit about that, Father George.
We just did it. We just did it. We were inspired to create community. We worked with Vanier for a year. It's not that we just popped up and said, and Vanier approved finally that we be L'Arche, and we began when people came to live. And
you developed a board.
We developed a board over that year of preparation. So we were well prepared that way, but we didn't know anything about what we needed to do with the state of Pennsylvania.
And you weren't receiving funding from them, correct?
No funding. We ate a lot of apples and onions, and we had people bring leftovers. We threw our money in insofar as we could, like a rent, room and board, so that we could all thrive.
I know when I came to L'Arche, even knowing the early days, the thing that I always remember was we want to keep L'Arche secret, and we're just going to nestle in the neighborhood, and so just like any other family. So that's what we did. We were just in the neighborhood, and nobody would even know that our house was L'Arche or a group home, if they want to call it a group home. But very simple. I remember the strawberry barrel, and we would just pick things, and as you said, our meals were whatever came along.
We had to get approval we changed the zoning to C3. Is that what it is? No.
C1.
C1. Commercial.
Yeah.
We had a little bit of unrest with the neighbors that, for all they knew, we'd tear the house down and put a gas station there. They didn't like the idea of commercial zoning, but even there we didn't have any opposition. The city of Erie, the council approved it, but it was hidden, and in fact the neighborhood was in great transition, and the older folks were so happy to see us come. Finally, when we did get funding and we had to renovate the home to meet standards, the older folks in the neighborhood were all excited about this. People are coming and they're investing in their property.
Well, we also purposely chose to own homes in the inner city. So that was always something that I think when we had the opportunity down the road to build to find homes, we always wanted to connect, but we always wanted to be where other people were devalued or poorer, and so we chose to be in the inner city.
Right. Well, tell me just quickly about when the state sort of heard of this and came to see you to, I guess, ask a few things?
Oh, Mel Knowlton was a disciple of Wolf Wolfensberger. He was in charge of the program in Pennsylvania. And we would hear, people would tell us that they were in Meadville or somewhere at a day-long training or orientation, and Mel Knowlton would say, I could close them down. They should be closed down. Now, I don't know if he said that publicly, but we got that message. So we were hearing that Mel Knowlton was going to close us down, and other people weren't so happy with our starting either. We didn't start with a lot of permission, nor did we start in conjunction with anybody we didn't know about those things. We were really ignorant of. We were just excited and we were capable and we did it. And we found out that Mel was not pleased with us. And he finally came to our home and he walked in the door, I'll never forget, and said, I could close you down tomorrow.
What a lovely greeting.
He might have said hello first, or he introduced himself. Then he went around the house and took pictures of our whole house. And we discovered later that when he was giving workshops around, he would show these pictures as examples of what life could be like for people who are institutionalized. So that was a big confirmation. Mm-hmm. And we found much later that Wolf Wolfensberger, who was a wonderful man, was very instrumental in our being allowed to continue. We didn't know that at first, but Wolf told me years later that because of his relationship with Mel Knowlton, he convinced Mel to give us a chance. Mm-hmm. So we wrote a proposal. I remember we said, we don't want money. And he said, if you don't want money, that's one thing, but you can't just do a program without approval. So we did both. We wrote the proposal for programming and for renovation of our home.
Mm-hmm.
So people had to move out.
Oh yeah, we all had to move out.
How long were people out of the house?
Oh my gosh, 6 months, 8 months.
To get it renovated and fixed up and the code and all those things?
So we had the nicest up-to-date home with the crookedest floors in the whole city of Erie. It didn't do much for the home, except that it became up to standards.
Right. So you were the pastoral leader for the home. What did that role entail for you? What was?
At first, it probably was getting in the way of Barbara, Sister Barbara, because we had this notion of being co-founders or co-directors. Well, that wasn't good. That didn't work. And I was occupied, employed at Gann, and she had left by then. So she was clearly the director of the community, and I was an assistant. I didn't think so much about being a priest of the community. That developed later in L'Arche, as other L'Arche communities were looking for. Oddly enough, it was priests mostly. A lot of communities were founded in the Catholic tradition. Mm-hmm. So Priests of L'Arche was a name that we used. And that developed for me. And then I certainly had that role in the community, but I was also just, I drove the van, I did the dishes, I cooked the food just like everyone else. Mm-hmm. But later, as L'Arche has proliferated, I did a lot more traveling and leading retreats or inviting people to come to Erie for times of prayer. We had a little prayer center at a certain point, a spiritual center where people could stay. So that got me out of Sister Barbara's hair. And I was able to find my own way there. Mm-hmm. But always yes. And then that ended at the right time, because for a long time here I was the founder or co-founder, and I'm still at the heart of authority. It was time to leave in about 1998. I think I went back to the university, but since then L'Arche is my home, my family. Mm-hmm. But I do a little bit of a spiritual animation now and again. But
okay. Now, Mary Ann, you began working at L'Arche in 1976, 4 years after its founding. So how did you become interested in L'Arche, and what was your role in the early years? And I think you had an opportunity to visit L'Arche and Trolli and meet Jean Vanier as well. And what was his impact on you?
Well, my coming to L'Arche was just kind of by accident, I would say, or a little surprise. I had been in a religious community, and I was just looking for what my next call was going to be, and I had been speaking to another priest who put me in touch with Father George. However, every time I tried to call to make that appointment, George was in India or someplace else, so it was quite difficult. So we finally connected. Well, he was at Gannon, and I still remember sitting across from his desk, and he just kind of looked at me, and I didn't know how to spell L'Arche. I knew nothing about it, and so I thought, I didn't know. I was just open, and so George goes, "Would you think about going to a crash pad in Toronto?" As open as I was, I said yes, because I didn't even know what I was saying yes to, but he said, "Well, go visit the house in Erie and then come back and see me in a couple of weeks." So I did, and I remember he called Ann Newroth at that time and said, "Did you get my message about Mary Ann coming to the crash pad?" And he goes, "Well, yeah, I have it right here." And so he turns to me and he says, "Oh, you're accepted. How are you going to get there?" Having lived in Erie all my life, I didn't know what to say, so I said, "I'll take a bus." So I always kind of say I jumped on the bus and I came to L'Arche. So, and that crash pad was a 2-week experience of L'Arche, which was just amazing to me. It was educational, it was life-giving, profound in learning about L'Arche. And during that week, the first week, we had different talks throughout the day, and we did get a chance to visit an institution. We saw some films, and not having any experience with persons with disabilities, it just really affected me of how mistreated people were and how limited they had to the rest of the world and things like that. And but then on the other side of it was the second week was where we actually got to be connected to one of the L'Arche homes on the Daybreak property. And so I had the chance to kind of just be with people in their day-to-day, whether it was helping, someone pick strawberries, or I had a chance to work in the bakery, and just seeing the abilities that people had and the friendships that developed. I was very, very touched by the whole thing. And probably the thing that was most surprising to me was that we had a break, and I was going through some things in my purse, and I had this little notebook, and I started looking through this little notebook, and here it was a notebook that I had heard Jean Vanier speak in Erie a couple years before that. But again, L'Arche, there was no connection whatsoever. I just remember, that his message was just profound, and, he just talked from his heart. And so it just kind of struck me that, oh my goodness, here it is, and as I look back in terms of my journey, probably seeds were planted well before that, because even as you talk about the Barber Center, when I was in high school, one of us, all the seniors had to go to sign up to go to some company or industry or whatever. And I don't know how if I signed up myself or I just got put in to the group, but I ended up going to the Barber Center. And again, I never made that connection that was to be with people with disabilities. So, there were those little things like that. And so when I came back from the Daybreak experience, I was working at a camp that summer, and I took some materials to read more about L'Arche. And there was just something stirring in me. In fact, one of the other women who was on the crash pad with me said, she sent me a letter and said, "Oh, will you come to Nova Scotia? And we're going to create a home, but it's not going to be L'Arche." And that just didn't set, for some reason, it just didn't set well with me. And I was very open to going to wherever I was needed. So I had sent a letter to Daybreak saying, I really would like to experience L'Arche. Can you tell me where they might need someone? And as I sent that letter, I received a letter from Sister Barbara saying, "Would you like to come to Erie?" So, and that happened just like the day before I was leaving to go on vacation to visit some of my friends. And so I thought, well, it doesn't make any difference to me. So I responded back and I said yes, that I'd come to Erie. And still, even though I had those little experiences, I didn't quite know what I was saying yes to. I didn't have the experience of what it was to live in a home and share life with the people, other than the few moments at the crash pad. So when I left, I said to my mom, I said, "Well, I don't know if I'm going to be here 2 days or 2 years or 2 months or whatever, but it's been my life."
Yeah. Well,
which I'm so grateful for.
Well, and you had the opportunity to work with Sister Barbara, and she died in 1982. And what was her influence on you, and what might be the legacy that Sister Barbara left? Would you say, for the community?
Well, I guess Sister Barbara, first of all, I didn't even really know Sister Barbara was the director of the community when I came, because when I came to visit, I went to the hearth to the first home, and Paula Simon was there. So I thought she was the assistant at the house. So I thought she was in charge, or it was Father George. So Sister Barbara, she was a woman of compassion. I mean, I felt that from the very beginning, where she definitely was there for the person, and it was always centered on the core member, and she was very exact with things. She liked things in order. She knew exactly how she wanted something run, and she was an English teacher besides, so she was a perfectionist when it came to speaking, but underneath that all, there was this woman of deep faith, and and I could tell that she believed so much in L'Arche and what she wanted for our homes, for our community, and she fought to get what we wanted in L'Arche, and but yet she had a heart that was also a heart of fun, and she would be part of the skits and want life to be fulfilling for people. So I think in all of that, I think there was a tenderness and just a real beautiful spirit of caring and loving people that I really appreciated.
Well, it's just so interesting, all the connections in your life of how they've sort of come full circle. And you've been in many administrative roles over your career with L'Arche. Can you talk a bit about how, from the early days, L'Arche has either changed or been influenced? And so you're sort of walking this line between a community, and yet you're receiving funding, and you've got certifications and other things to address. So how has it been over the years, being in the roles you've been in?
Well, there were many challenges at times. I remember it wasn't until 1980 when the state came back in again, and it was now we were going to be inspected. Well, that went so against our grain, because we were here to just have a family home, to share life. Let's live life like you or I lived in my own family life. And we didn't want to have to take notes and progress notes and goal planning. I remember having classes on goal planning, and we all, as assistants, we all found that very upsetting. And yet, I think even Sister Barbara helped us to realize that it wasn't that it was there for a reason. There was a purpose behind it. It was, in the sense of doing it, we were also helping our core members to grow, to share maybe some of their hopes and their dreams, and how we can help them in those little steps to achieve some of the things they've never had the opportunity to. So when you looked at it in that respect, we could begin to see the value of some of those regulations that had to come down. I know the very first inspection we had was very rigid, and the inspectors were crawling up into the attics and looking for smoke detectors and everything, and it was just, it was almost felt demeaning in a way, because we had something that was more essential, of being present to people, and that was really at the heart of what we wanted. Not everything being measured out and written, because I think in the end that doesn't always mean a quality of life, and that's was our focus. So over the years, I think we know that we have to meet those regulations. We have to abide by them for our homes to exist, just as George found out in the very beginning, that they could close us if we didn't meet those. So it's help educating our assistants also to know that there's a value behind some of these regulations. We don't like them, but hopefully we can balance that with a life of community and a life of relationship with people. I mean, Jean always spoke of that as something so primary as can you be a friend to a person? And to me, in growing up in L'Arche, I think that was always so much at the heart of who I was, and yet I would always attend to the regulations. And so I think life has changed, and it's and as we get larger and there are more things to be concerned with, sometimes it's really hard to know when you're an agency, when you're a community, and how to blend those two elements together. But it's a constant journey.
Right.
Can I add something there?
Yes, Father George.
Right at the beginning, when I was on the International Council, I was giving my report about the region that I was part of and my community. And at the end of my presentation, Jean said that you talked a lot about the regulations of the state, and that was a challenge and a distraction maybe. He said, but your real issue is community, the difficulty, the challenges of living community.
Right, right.
But from the beginning, we had regulations, and many L'Arche communities didn't have them, not even in France for years later. But I remember also that Vanier at one point said that we learned how to love one another in Trolly, but we didn't always know how to advance somebody's capacity. We didn't always pay attention to what they needed for their own practical development.
Right.
He had a beautiful vision of people and what their capacity is and how we're to call it forth. But again, he knew the balance from the other side. It's always a balance.
Right, right. So, Father George, talk about what you would see as some of the accomplishments, joys of the community, as well as what maybe has been some of the greatest challenges.
Well, the accomplishments are that here we are after 47 years, and that as I look around even L'Arche generally in the U.S., but here especially, people are well, they're well cared for, they're loved, there's a spirit of joy among us. Our core members seem to have a certain autonomy and a creativity, and They don't need permission to get up and take the microphone and express themselves. And the friendship is evident, and we have some wonderful assistants. From the beginning, we did not all live in. Other communities made that a requirement. You had to live in. Barbara never saw that as the essential. She didn't think that we were going to ever cause people to suffer because we didn't have enough assistance, because we didn't have enough people wanting to live in. So we've always had people who lived out, but were committed to our mission and our charter. And that's true today. So we have a broad network of people who come and go. They have their own families, they have their own life, but they're essential to our life as well. So I see that today. I'm really struck by that. And I'm struck by the second generation, third generation of leaders in L'Arche. We went way beyond, there were so many religious who were touched by Vanier's spiritual message, and we all founded communities. Now we're into another generation entirely, or maybe 3 generations later. We see people who are capable and creative and still have the spirit of L'Arche. I see that as always the beauty. The challenge is things are changing. How do we, assistants don't jump in with both feet in the same way that we did at the beginning. So we have to honor that people have lives of their own. And we also have regulations about how many hours a week you can be part of the effort of the community. That's a challenge for us. But it's also that spiritually, Vanier, I insist that Jean Vanier is an incredible visionary around religion. The three legs of the stool of L'Arche he called therapy, spirituality, and community. These 3, he said, if one's missing, it is going to stand up. So that's the challenge still today. He had a deep sense of the spirit of every human being, and a deep sense of what community can do for people, and a deep sense of what he called L'Arche's authentic therapy, which was mutual relationship. That challenge is as fresh today as it was the first day. I remember when we started, after all the excitement of starting was over, Barbara and I looked at each other one day and said, what do we do now? Or as Dawn Follett in the book Sharing Life said, after she started in Africa and got everything going, she said to the others, what do we do after breakfast? So that's always the challenge. What do we do after breakfast? What do we do after we've fallen on our nose? What do we do after we've gotten tired and thought it was a beautiful thing and discover it's not? And Vanier said that we begin by saying everybody's a saint. 6 months later, everybody's a devil. And then eventually everybody is just who they are. Mm-hmm. So that challenge is as fresh as today as it was at the beginning.
Yeah. Well, your community now has 7 homes and 29 core members. You have more than 70 employees. So how, what is L'Arche like today, with this, and have elements changed since the beginning? You've talked a bit about some of the changes through regulations and people not necessarily living in, but it's a pretty large community right now. So what changes have you seen, Mary Ann, since the early days?
Certainly as we've gotten larger, there are things that are harder to do, and I think one of the biggest changes is that many of our core members are aging, so they have retired from being at a day program. So we have many more people at home during the day. Yet we want to engage them in activities out in the community, still keep them active. Listen to some of the things they like to do. So that's one aspect that has changed. Their medical needs are greater, and so we we've had to have our own nurse, and that's challenging too, to just meet some of the day-to-day and the seriousness of people's illness. From an assistance standpoint, we've gone through our ups and downs with not having enough assistance to having plenty of assistance and meeting needs. And probably in the last couple of years, it's been very challenging to encourage people or recruit people to want to come to the community. And then it's also finding that right person who wants to embrace and the mission of L'Arche, and I think that's a major challenge in and of itself, because being a French word, in Erie, most people have no idea, even though we've been here the 47 years, what's this L'Arche thing? And it's hard to explain, because I know even for myself, it's a lived experience, and it's that connection with people, that relationship that's building. And so the other things that have had to change, or we're not able to do as many community gatherings or events. Maybe, in the early days we were small, so we could, as a whole community, go to a retreat weekend, and we invite other people from other L'Arches to come and kind of help form us in that way. So when you have that large a group, it makes it so much harder. And even we've lessened meetings, the number of meetings we've had, and we've also welcomed people of either many faiths, no faiths, and yet receive them as part of the community. So as we said, we people really thought that we were all Catholic, and so that whole faith tradition thing has been here, and so it's a growth. It's a growth that I think we all needed, and it opens us up to diversity and welcoming people. So there's a lot that has changed, and there's probably more to change in the future.
Right. Well, one of the things is that I've always found unique about L'Arche is when you make a commitment to a person, that commitment is a lifelong commitment. So you have people who've been here for a long time, who are getting older, and yet you still find ways to connect and support people. That has to be hard. What allows that to happen?
I think it becomes part of who we are, and because of that relationship, I think we want to be there because we care about the person, we love the person, we want them to have the best quality of life they can. So, and that friendship, that bond was created through our relationship in L'Arche, even as they age. So some people may have had to go into a nursing home, or they're in the hospital for a long time. And so we tried to look at ways of being present to them, and they too know that we're part of their family. So just as my mom was in the hospital, I'd go visit my mom. Well, I want to visit my friend in community too. And I have a dear friend who was one of the early core members of L'Arche, Frances, who still lives, I think George might have mentioned her, she still lives in her own apartment. And it's like we've always been connected. So we've known each other for 43 years. And I probably get a call from her almost every day or every few days. And, and I think that's one of the great things about L'Arche. Even though we have 7 houses and people, we know one another. Our core members know everybody in the community. We're just not our individual home. And so because it's broader than just the 4 people or 6 people in a home, that's extended. And we live that out through our prayer life. allowing us to pray for each other and hold each other in difficult times. So all of those are ways to stay connected with, people as they age and need us.
So you have the L'Arche Erie community, but L'Arche is a much larger community. It's international. I mean, I think we said L'Arche homes and communities around the world. So, Father George, can you speak a bit about the international aspect of it? Are you here at L'Arche Erie in touch with other L'Arche communities? And how's all that work? How does L'Arche create this larger than just a local community, a much broader community?
All right, we've all had experiences of that in our time, but my time is over with that pretty much. I got a chance to speak to the leaders of L'Arche in the U.S. Back in the spring or early summer, and I really appreciated that. I haven't been to an international meeting in a long time. Vicki, our director, would be well current with that. But I just remember that I was at the second Federation meeting ever, and there were 25 of us, and we spoke French or English. And Vanier was saying, in a number of years, we will be welcoming people who are enemies culturally and historically, and who do not speak each other's languages. We will be together in Federation meetings, and it's true. Over the years, hundreds of people come, not just 25. And the languages are diverse, and the cultures, crossing cultures which are not especially peaceful back where they come from. But I don't have current touch with all of that. I'm aware that L'Arche is going through a real time of testing now with the death of Jean. Our founder has died. We loved him dearly. He had a vision that kept us going, that encouraged us. And so we're a little bit like children without a mom and dad,
Yeah.
Do we get together? How do we get together? But that's my own sense of where we are. I don't have a good touch with that.
Mary Ann, how about yourself?
I think, L'Arche International, provides opportunities, for retreats, different formations or trainings, if we can send people to Trolli, that's a gift in itself. And we have been able to do that. And certainly people come back, blessed and changed from being there. We have our regional gatherings every 2 years. And so in L'Arche USA, we have the various regions. And so those communities, like there's 5 or 6 in our region, and we all come together for like 3 days, 4 days, a long weekend, and to celebrate, to hear what the other communities are doing. Certainly L'Arche International has made aware, like the first Saturday of October is L'Arche International Day. We have access to newsletters, and I think social media has been, the internet has been wonderful. We have the whole series, the I Am series about L'Arche, where we have presented that to our community, and you begin to realize you're not just this little community or just us. We're so much broader, and I always get excited when I know we can send people, because what you experience on your home level, the spirit and the mission of L'Arche is so true, whether you're in Canada, India, Syracuse, wherever. It's amazing when you walk into a L'Arche home. It's a L'Arche home just by the welcome and the spirit that's present there. The spirituality, it's universal in that way. So I think it's so important that people have that opportunity to experience, trainings and formations and everything, or just visit communities. I mean, that's even important. Sometimes, other communities will call us and say, can we come, we're traveling through, can we come and visit your community? Can we stay overnight, on our way to wherever, and so those opportunities, make us realize, yes, we're all sharing the same mission.
Right, right.
So, yeah, it's
Well,
really
we
good.
had spoken earlier about the 1987 international gathering in Rome, Italy. And I remember, as you were indicating, Father George, sitting at a table, and I spoke English and no one else did, okay, and trying to converse and have a meaningful conversation. And what kept us all together was obviously the meal that you're sharing, you're breaking bread together, but you had this commonality around the L'Arche life, and so it's a unique aspect. And you mentioned ecumenicalism, that L'Arche, oftentimes people think about it as a Catholic community, but it transcends and goes across all faiths. And I think in that we learn to live with one another, with our differences.
Yeah, I think that's really, truly a gift. When I look at my own experience in L'Arche, I think, boy, if I hadn't been here, I probably would never have been open to so much that L'Arche, just, the differences in all various aspects of, who we welcome and faith and just, celebrations and everything. It's just, you see the equality of us, as one body. So
I want to add something
Yes, Father George.
about the meaning of L'Arche, welcoming people and then walking with them to their death. We've got some wonderful community members who were just leading us as they came to the end of their life with love and compassion, where they didn't always know how to express that before. But you know why I'm here? Because L'Arche is my home, my family, and I'm getting older. And I look forward to that being held at the end of my life as well. And I have a lot of grace given to me that would normally not have been experienced because I would have lived a bit of a life of isolation. Clerics are a little bit isolated. They're in touch with many people, but on another hand, their family is not direct and intimate. I've been part of an intimate, direct family for 47 years, which has been worked through me for the benefit of other people as well. So and I must say that I've been to L'Arche in Trolli for programs, retreats, orientations, trainings over the last 10 years, and I see a whole host of new leaders around the world coming together. It's amazing, lay leaders, young men and women with just capacity to lead and a vision. It's really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But one day, as I become less and less that, I'm going to rely on the people around me to hold me.
Right, right. Mm-hmm. Mary Ann, you've been with the community now for so many years, and what's it meant, and you've shared a little bit of this, but what's it meant to you, perhaps to your family, and what's this experience of L'Arche, really meant for you? And you've talked about, some of the original members of the community still being in touch with people, assistants who've come to the community who have left, still having relationships with the community. I mean, it's just a sense of community. Even though people aren't here, they still have this connection. But what has all this meant to you? I mean, what's been the...
It's been truly a blessing. I mean, a true gift. Again, it was something that I would have never probably, said, oh, this is what I'm going to do with my life. But I feel it was total gift, and it was the working of the Spirit to be part of L'Arche. Even in the very early days, even probably within my first year of L'Arche, I was just totally amazed to think, oh, I'm doing something, but I never thought I would experience community outside of a religious community. So as a lay faith community, I was just awed by the whole experience of it, and I think just the blessing of, I just value the prayer of our core members, which is universal in L'Arche, of sharing after a meal, passing the candle around, and their deep, deep love of God. I think that has helped me to build a better relationship with God because of who they are and, just their simplicity of life. And I think, I think it's affected my everyday life and how I live, and and just my own relationships with people. I know even my daughter just said to me, oh, your uncle, he says he just can't believe how Mary Ann can just be present to people, that kind of thing. And I think that, I think having time with Jean and so many wise and faithful people in L'Arche, they've carried me at moments of real struggle and hardship and yet, I don't know, you just feel a belonging and a oneness that I think my life would be just so totally different had I not been at L'Arche. It truly is family. Everybody that my relatives will always say, L'Arche will always be part of your life, and I think and I am very blessed that my husband supported me in this journey, even though he wasn't fully a part of L'Arche all the time, but he knew how much it meant to me, and that that enriched our own relationship. So, and I think the core members are really what our teachers I value so much. They've taught me about forgiveness, welcoming, their simplicity, just their honesty. So all those things have been just total gift. And I don't know. I'll see where the future takes me. But I'm sure L'Arche will be part of it.
We can hope that.
Yeah.
Well, Father George, in a recent email, you shared a reflection about how L'Arche communities are inspired with a deep vision of daring to believe in human community, and how that vision plays out as the community moves forward over years and decades. I'd like to, if it's okay, read a reflection and ask you to say more. And here's what you had said. L'Arche communities have been inspired with a deep vision of daring to believe in human community. We come filled with aspirations, sensing that we have been searching for such meaning and purpose. We sooner or later fall over our own heightened expectations. But wondrously, we are picked up by someone in our community, someone we thought we were caring for, who in fact sets us back on our feet, a little more humble, but a great deal more human. And we learn to continue together as fellow travelers on the way.
I don't know what I would be like if I were not in a L'Arche community. I don't know whether I would have grown humanly as I have. And that's with all my defenses in place. If I had really given all my defenses away and just gave myself completely, I probably would be a little farther along the road. But people accepted me the way I am, as I am. And they're teaching me how to do the same with them. And in 2001 in Toronto, north of Toronto, Vanier gave this day-long workshop on dare we believe in human community. That focused me even after all those years that I'd been in L'Arche. It focused me again on what we're doing and how we're doing it. So I don't know where I'd be in terms of what I've been able to do to break my own heart open and to be intimate with people. Again, it's difficult for me to be intimate. That's who I am. That's how I am. But I've been given a wonderful group that just holds me there and waits for me to discover with them. It isn't just one way, either way, it's mutual. With them, I discover others more intimately as they discover me. So we do it together. We do it without a lot of ideas. We don't have big discussions around the table about ideas or what books we've read last or what we think about this or that. But there's a heart-to-heart exchange that I find nowhere else in my life. It's pretty human, and sometimes it's gives me indigestion when I'm up against myself or someone else. But I tell you, it's worth passing through those défis in French, those challenges. So the opportunities for being human are immense, immense. And I wouldn't have learned about those opportunities in me without people around me like I have in L'Arche.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, Mary Ann, you said it, the core members oftentimes, who've oftentimes come from lives where they didn't have community and they were alone and wounded in many ways and even broken in some sense. In L'Arche, because of the love I think that's expressed and just the breaking bread together and being together and worshiping, their gifts just shine. And sometimes the gift is just that they're loving back. And it's quite incredible when that occurs. And all too often that's forgotten in the human service world or elsewhere, where in L'Arche that tends to be what is held tightly, Yes.
That would be so against the gospel of Christ or of any major religion that if we do not help a person to know that they are capable of loving, that's the greatest disease, maybe, and the greatest tragedy in our world is that we have learned to be partisan. We have learned to be divisive. We wonder in our own culture right now, how'd we get this way? We learned to do it, and we don't know how not to be partisan. We don't know how not to be critical, how not to be fearful. So it's a school. L'Arche is a school of love. It's a school of risking to find another way.
Well, people sometimes hear the word community, and they have these high hopes and dreams and perfection and beautiful. That's not what community is it?
No, we can be a little bit crazy. We can be emotionally moved to great heights. We can stumble over ourselves and become sad in community. It's everything human is possible, and everything possible is worth paying attention to and lifting it up and encouraging us to go forward no matter the circumstances. That's what community does. It sticks around long enough to give us another chance. As I said in that thing, we fall down, we get up. We fall down, we get up. We fall down, we get up.
Well, we're coming to a close here. Is there anything else either one of you would like to share before we end this interview?
I guess as I was sitting here, thinking about all that we've shared, I think the one thing that is also very important about community, and when I think of our core members and I think assistants as well, there's so much transformation that has gone on in L'Arche, from where people have grown so much through trust, because especially our core members, they finally feel that they're being held too, that they're loved, and that to hear someone say, "Oh, you're my friend," I just value, like, we're going to have Chat and Chew, and Linda comes into my office every Tuesday, and we'll just say, "You're my friend," and I think that says it all, and it's so sincere, and I'm grateful I have her in my life.
Father George, anything else?
I'm impressed with what Mary Ann has said this morning. If for no other reason for me to be here, it was to hear Mary Ann say what my heart knows to be true, and I really value her friendship as well. She didn't say what struck me most about her when I first met her across that desk was that she was a cook. Cooking for people all summer long. Mary Ann is one of the most peaceful, serene, productive cooks in our community. But there's more. She's cooked up a lot of love and support for her because she offers it so freely. She's a good person, and thank you for what you said today.
Well, I thank you both. It's just a very joyful for me. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This interview was recorded on December 3rd, 2019 at L'Arche Erie. Interviewer was Guy Caruso. Videographers were Ryan Haggerty and Matthew Thornton. Interview with Father George Strohmeyer, co-founder of L'Arche Erie, and Mary Ann Zarnick, longtime staff member. The Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium expresses sincere appreciation to L'Arche Erie, Father George Strohmeyer, Mary Ann Zarnick, Vicki Washik, Guy Caruso, Senator John Hines History Center, Edith L. Trees Charitable Trust, FISA Foundation, Achieva, Institute on Disabilities at Temple University. Photo from St. Patrick's Day Parade, courtesy of L'Arche Erie. This interview is a production of the Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium. The logo of the Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium shows the map of Pennsylvania. The counties in the western half of the state are highlighted. To learn more about disability history in Western Pennsylvania, visit www.wpdhac.org. Copyright Western Pennsylvania Disability History and Action Consortium 2021. All rights reserved.